All good. So, Josh, do me a favor. Just talk a little bit about your background as a sports writer and just kind of your career on the whole.
Yes, so I former sports writer more so actually than current. Though I do dabble in writing still whenever I can. I covered University of Alabama athletics in the mid 2000s. Kind of weird saying that. That sounds like so long ago now. And then I worked at three Olympic committees doing content press operations for them. Covered the Nashville Predators hockey team for the Tennessean, which is when I kind of came into Jeff's orbit because he was working with the LA Kings and I was at games that the Preds are playing the Kings. So then went from there, covered the National Hockey League for Yahoo Sports for like 2.5 years and then worked at The Athletic for 5 years as an editor slash writer. And now I'm doing PR for Big Hassle Media, trying to guide different companies, people, sports adjacent companies, non-sports companies towards helping their own storytelling and also trying to pitch ideas on these, I guess, about these groups to various media entities.
So, go back, put yourself in the shoes of the students here. What type of writer were you at their age, as you best recall?
Can I use profanity?
Sure.
I was shitty. Like I really was. I wasn't very good. But the funny thing is I thought I was great. So that's what I think my main takeaway is that you know I I I knew what the flow of a story looked like. I didn't know how to be concise and compact in my writing. I was very all over the place. I definitely did not ask enough questions of the subjects that I was doing stories on. And, I thought I knew what a good story looked like. Um, I was like shocked when I didn't get internships in various summers because I was like, I'm a great writer. Like, why would they not want me? But really, I had a lot to learn. And I was very, very fortunate to have really, really good bosses early on in my career that uh, showed me what a good story looked like and how to write a good story.
So, what we're doing this week is, long form writing, a traditional feature story. I mean, in this day and age, do you even see value in something like that with all the technology that's out there? Just curious your thoughts on that.
Ooh. So I will speak for myself, and then I will speak for what I think everyone else thinks. I personally don't like long form stories online right now. I very much prefer long form stories in print and printed out. In part because I mean I don't need to like get too into the weeds in this, but like there is very much, and I say this as I'm on a screen right now, but like there is very much a screen epidemic that is just terrible when it comes to reading just stories in general. So I do think there's still value in it. I really can't get past that much on my phone because then it's just like I feel like I'm on my phone and that's a problem just being antisocial around kids and stuff like that. I'm fine with reading stuff on my laptop, weirdly. A lot of people use iPads, but ultimately I do think that we've reached this weird, I guess, point in life where I think feature stories are really important. I have a very, very hard time reading them. I don't know, just if does anyone else have trouble reading them like long form content on screens? Like, I can't. Like, anyone else have that problem? Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
several hands are going up, mine
yeah,
included.
yeah, I'm just curious. So just want to make sure I'm not the only one here. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it, as that it's still vital, but I like to consume it in maybe a different way than other people.
So let's focus on being a sports writer. There's different types of stories. There's a Q&A, which is literally where you see the question and the answer, question and the answer. There's what we'll call maybe first person, where or like diary form. where you're interviewing a subject and you're in essence, kind of ghostwriting for them. My first big league baseball game by Mike Trout, as told to Josh Cooper. Then there's kind of like what a columnist would do from an opinion standpoint, like an editorial. So if I were to say, what is a feature story, kind of just, I don't want to say dumb it down, but just kind of take a step back. What is a feature story? What does a feature story look like?
I think a feature story, well, first off, to me, it accentuates your writing and your writing talent, which is important. And that's not unimportant in today's world. I still think there's value that. So it accentuates your writing, and you are telling a story about a person, place, thing, event, and really nailing all the details as best you can. I've had features I've done that have been as short as 600 words. Some have been as long as like 2,000 to 3,000 words. I know some people that have written features way longer than that. Um, but I think, when I think of a feature story, it's something that tells the story of that subject. You use quotes from them, but ultimately it's you who are the arbiter of what is most important in the story. And it's using your writing and your writing style, which is important.
So I'm not going to jump ahead yet, but kind of use the idea that you're going to do a phone interview with somebody, and then that's the only person you're going to talk to, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're going to write a feature story about that person. Um, but before you even put pen to paper or type a word on a blank screen, I'll talk a little bit about the interview. Say you have the phone interview set up with an athlete, one on one with Mookie Betts of the Dodgers. Um, you're going to come up with something that's maybe unique, interesting, trying to tell something about the subject to the audience. Let's say in this case, it's for the Dodgers website. So it's obviously the people who are reading this are well versed on the subject and the sport and the team, etc. When you're doing the interview itself, again, maybe it's a 10-minute phone call with him. What are you kind of sketching out before you dial the number?
Well, first off, when I think you're interviewing an athlete, you need to have a bit of an icebreaker overall. So, I would just kind of read. I mean, it's a risk, but I think it's important to have something that you can like, or like a joke that you can just kind of lead with, and so that you can get them laughing and relaxed. Have a bunch of questions mapped out. Like you have to have your questions that you really, really, really want slash need to be asked, but then you also have your questions. I think you need to have more of an outline, so to speak, and you have to think on the fly with questions, and you have to listen very closely to what they're saying. Sometimes honestly, like, I mean, you have to listen, but you may not hear everything. I use the trick of trying to listen to the last like 10 words that they say. If I miss something that they said, to try to be like, then jar them to like the next thing. Of course, then I'll go back and listen to my recording. I'll be like, oh shit, like I should have pressed them more on that or asked them this question. But ultimately, I really, I think you just have to, first off, again, like have something that's going to make them kind of drop their guard a bit. You may not have that opportunity, but try to if you do. And then just have a bunch of questions mapped out as far as how the direction you want the feature to go. Like if it's Mookie Betts, maybe, the stories about how he's played like a bajillion different positions. And so I don't know, like you look up something in his past about growing up in Tennessee and just ask him about like some restaurant where he grew up or whatever. I don't know. Like there's different ways to go about it, but like just definitely, or maybe like the latest thing that like Mookie Betts posted online, and that may have been funny, and just ask him about that. Or I don't know, like the thing the Dodgers do with the wave or whatever when they get on base, like ask him about that. Or I mean, just start with that, or so I don't know. Like there's a million different ways to go, but start out with an icebreaker, then get to your questions.
So you're given the assignment. Let's say you're given a word count, minimum 1,000 words. You've done the interview, it went well. You asked them 6 or 7 questions. Um, Before I ask my question, I'll ask you the question I was going to ask. You don't have to use every single word he says, right?
Nope. Nope, you don't. And sometimes you can paraphrase it too. You can write it out. No, you don't have to use every single word he said. That's mostly like Jeff, you mentioned Q&A style. That would be more for a Q&A. And even for a Q&A, you write on top like edited for length and clarity. So you don't always have to use every single word, but like close, a lot of words. Yeah, like I mean, but no, like you can paraphrase. And again, like I think the my favorite features writer is a guy who actually now works at LA Clippers, and he's really high up with the Clippers. He's not a sports writer anymore. His name's Lee Jenkins. He went to Vanderbilt, which is how I got to know him, because I went to school there. And then he worked for like the Orange County Register, the New York Times, and eventually ended up at Sports Illustrated and broke all sorts of stories about LeBron James. But he was such a good writer. Still is probably, like he just doesn't write anymore. So, I mean, to me, I think the big key with him, the big key is just trying to write. You can paraphrase what they say and do it that way compared to just
Okay,
like,
so now you're ready to type away. It's like everything else. You start on a blank screen. No words. You got
mm-hmm.
to fill minimum 1,000. What the boss says. The interview's done. You think it went okay. You got 6 or 7 questions asked of your subject matter. Um, what's kind of important as you're getting underway, in your opinion?
I think when you're starting out, you need to think of so you have to start with your lead. I mean, you don't have to start writing your lead, to be honest, but or with your lead being the first paragraph, but I think you need to have a good idea of what you're going to write, and you just kind of have your lead, which is um the thing that would grab a writer in like quickest. You have statement of purpose, thesis, the journalistic term for it is a nut graph. And that nut graph, what it does is then it just basically says like why you're writing this story. So if it's on Mookie Betts, it's like, if this case is like his versatility, it's like why Mookie Betts is, or let's say like you're writing why he's actually more valuable in the history of baseball than Shohei Ohtani. Like you explain, your point of view. It's like, oh, because he's played like every position except catcher and pitcher. And then, you have it kind of flow down with all these quotes and your writing style. And I always ended a story with a quote. But that's because I was never good enough as a writer to think of a good ending. A lot of writers, what they do is they'll take an ending and they'll bring it back to the beginning, like if there's some sort of callback to it. I just always figured a quote was a really good way to end a story. And I just maybe it could have been lazy. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't good enough, but I just yeah, I always used a quote at the end of a story. Like that's what I did.
So I want you to repeat again kind of what you said initially in terms of the formatting. So I know you didn't say it, but basically no feature story ever starts with a quote. So I'll just kind of say that for the class. All right, so go back. You mentioned a quote at the very end of the story is very common. Go back to those first couple graphs again. What was that kind
Yes.
of format you were saying?
Yes, the first graph is called a lead, and the way it was described to me, ironically, well, I don't know if it's ironically or coincidentally, I'm never good at actually knowing what irony is, which is kind of funny to me. But coincidentally, by Lee Jenkins, uh, it was that your lead is if you walked into a bar and you had to tell everyone something about this particular story, what is the one thing you would tell literally everyone? And so that is your lead. I look at it a little bit more succinctly as kind of like it's just the most interesting thing that it's just the most interesting thing that would come into a story like that would really just grab people in and garner their attention because really I once had stats on our feature stories at the Tennessean and how deep people got into them, and it was pretty sad. They didn't get very deep into them. And then after your lead, you have the journalistic term is called your nut graph. So it's your statement of purpose. It's like, why are you writing this? What is it? Um, what is your goal of this story essentially? Like, what is the purpose of this story? And then from that point on, you just flow it down into various paragraphs. You explain the story, what the story is, you use quotes. And then, yeah, I'm just sort of going through the whole progression, Jeff. And then we get to the end, which, as I said, I end with a quote generally. That doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. It was just the way I was able to do it because, like, any one of you in this class could be far more creative than me at ending a story with a cool anecdote or something along those lines. I just wasn't very good at it. So I always ended with a quote because I thought it tied it back really well.
So I'll just interject here for the class. Our first assignment of the semester was a pitch letter. Very similar. First sentence, second sentence, third sentence, first graph, the lead, the hook, something to grab their attention. As opposed to the press release when we were the LA Clippers and we traded someone or traded for someone, that was a very boring writing, very plain, fact driven. But yet at the same time, Josh, a feature story still needs to kind of have those essentials that you hear so much in journalism of who, what, when, where, why.
Yep. Yep. No, 100%, Jeff. You need to know, you need the setting, you need to know who it's about, and why you're writing it. A lot of that goes in the nut graph, I feel like, but that's a very good point. That is the essence of your entire story is the who, what, when, where, why. And you just make it work with your writing and you use the quotes use the quotes to supplement them. Some people only read quotes, which I think is kind of funny. That's a little bit of an aside. Um, but that's only on like news stories in a lot of ways. To me, like a feature story, the quotes are supportive, but they don't make the story. I think your writing is what makes the story in a feature.
Um, I mentioned earlier with that Dodger Mookie Betts website analogy, know your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is kind of just know your boss, right? So if you were writing a story on, well, I don't use who's a controversial athlete. Anybody?
Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods.
Well,
Okay. So well, no,
he doesn't have a boss, so
yeah,
he
no.
doesn't play for a team.
Let me give me a controversial athlete on a team.
Draymond.
Who's that?
Draymond Green.
Yeah,
Draymond Green.
good call.
Okay. So Josh is interviewing Draymond Green. Let's say give it two scenarios. One for ESPN.com or two, the Golden State Warriors.com or whatever it is. Warriors.com, NBA Warriors.com. The team website of the Golden State Warriors or the San Francisco Chronicle or ESPN.com or the New York Times or whatever. You're still getting the same amount of time with Draymond. Are you writing differently? And if so, what specifically is different about a story for a team publication, so to speak, as opposed to maybe a general media story?
So I can give you this analogy. I know you all are young, but back in 2007, when I covered University of Alabama, Nick Saban, the former head coach, compared losing to Louisiana Monroe to Pearl Harbor and 9/11.
Oh,
And that was a huge story at the time. Now, I got what he was trying to do. He sort of got put into a spot where he got really passionate and emotional and brought up these two, which were at the time most significant events in recent American history. Um, and so from a website perspective, the website was like Saban talks about preparation for Mississippi State. There was, from what I recall, zero mention of him comparing losing to Louisiana Monroe to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. The PR staff, they gave us an entire transcript of the press conference. and had the whole 9/11 Pearl Harbor thing because they knew that we would definitely have that. We were all sitting there, we all heard it. It was pointless to not give us that. So if I'm thinking fast forward to Draymond Green, uh, if you're interviewing Draymond Green, you have to remember, and you're interviewing him for Warriors.com, you have to remember your paycheck. You have to remember who's paying you. It's the Warriors. Your job is to make the Warriors and Draymond Green look good. Your job is to do, well, I wouldn't say look good, but like your job is basically do what you're told in that case. And there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen in regards to someone of that stature with Draymond Green, where you probably have him wanting a certain message to be said, the team wanting a certain message to be said, his agent wanting a certain message to be said. But ultimately, you have to listen to your boss and what your boss wants. And so it, at the end of the day, has to appeal to what your boss is asking you to do. And then whatever happens after that, that's on a higher level within the organization. So I think the key is always to remember, make your boss happy and remember who's paying you in those situations, which like, like if you want to like do the whole journalism thing, like, yeah, I mean, like if you're the San Francisco Chronicle, you're writing something completely different um Golden State Warriors.com did. I remember like the 9/11 Pearl Harbor Day, like that's exactly what I wrote about. And that University of Alabama did not write about that. So, you just have to do what makes your boss happy and they deal with the consequences basically.
And we'll end on this. Maybe just go back to that real quick. So the Saban thing was probably in a big press conference room with
Yes.
50 media people. It wasn't a phone call. So if you were interviewing Nick, if that was done on a phone call, and
I
again,
would
you're either
not
then if
mention
you
it.
work for Alabama, you're just kind of as he's saying it, you're listening. You're probably saying to yourself, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to use that." But if you're the Alabama newspaper, you're probably circling that,
Oh my God.
highlighting it to no extent, and making sure you had hit record.
Okay. I don't need to get into like all the problems with media right now, but like if I was working for University of Alabama, I would definitely not write about that. I would tell my boss he said it. My boss would likely say, do not go there. And so I wouldn't. Now, if I'm a beat writer and Nick Saban on a one-on-one is giving me an exclusive and comparing losing to Louisiana Monroe to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor, I am 100% making that my lead and just blasting it everywhere. Is that the right thing to do? No, it's sensationalist and ridiculous. Sorry, I'm getting a little I'm getting a little going off a little bit off script here, but that's the big difference. Is that I mean, really, what's most important to the team you're working for is the preparations for Mississippi State. If that's what you're talking to him about, or whatever your boss has asked you to ask Nick Saban. If I'm a beat reporter for an independent entity, I'm 100% doing like going with that. I am, however, thinking a little bit about my relationship with him and that it would kill my relationship with Nick Saban if I went with that. But like he said it, and that's just kind of you'd have to let it play out the way it's supposed to play out. I couldn't. There's no chance that I could get that and then not go with it unless like I hit it from my boss, which like I wouldn't do if which I wouldn't do, but I would only do that if I had like a really good relationship with Nick Saban and he called me like 5 minutes later and was like, "Hey, remember when I like compared losing to Louisiana Monroe to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor? Please don't use that." Then I would 100% like not go with it. But yeah, like you have to do what's best for your entity. And if you're working for University of Alabama, I know we were supposed to talk about Draymond Green and now we're talking about Nick Saban, but like you have to do 100% what the entity you're working for wants you to do.
And last question, I think I know the answer. Have you ever written anything that the athlete called you out on it, or because it's it's one thing. What you get a lot from sports writers are kind of like a hit and run, where you just basically write something, you just roast a team,
I
and then you
hate
don't
that.
show up to practice the next day or anything like that.
Terrible.
Have you ever written anything and then gotten any negative feedback in person in a short amount of time?
So everyone, this is part of mine and Jeff's comedy skit right here. Because I like he knows the answer. And uh this this is probably yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day and someone says like, what's your money story? I don't think it's my money story, but it's a ridiculous story. In my opinion, it's a ridiculous story. So I was working for Yahoo Sports. James Neal was a player in the Nashville Predators, like really full of himself, scored a lot of goals, drove a white Ferrari around Nashville, had a reputation of being kind of a jerk. I had no problems with him because I thought he was unabashedly himself. I thought it was great. He kept getting suspended. He kept doing dirty stuff, like, but he scored a lot of goals. Like, he was a great player, but like, he just was very much like a dirty, good player. And so I once wrote about him getting suspended, and how I tried to couch my little sort of blog post was that I would write exactly what happened. I wasn't going to put any opinion in there. It was just basically what happened. So we then get an email to our company email address from James Neal's mother, basically saying to go easy on him because he was, like he's misunderstood, yada, yada, yada. And James Neal was actually at the All-Star game that weekend. Well, first of all, I messaged her and I was like, we're just writing about the suspension. I'm not trying to like rip James. Like, it's like nothing personal or anything like that. So he's at the All-Star game. He's having a lot of fun there. And, he did really well. And so I messaged her again. And I was just like, hey, saw James at the All-Star game. I didn't talk to him, but I was just like, looked like he was having a lot of fun. Like, he's having a great season. Best of luck to him rest of the way. And she was like, oh, thank you. Appreciate that. So fast forward to the playoffs, and the Predators are playing the Anaheim Ducks. I'm living in the LA area at the time. I live in the Orange County area mostly. So going to the Preds locker room, and I go up to James Neal and I want to talk to him about a player named PK Subban who was new on Nashville that year. And James is like, I don't want to talk to you. And I'm like, why? He's like, because you're the guy who's been like ripping us on Twitter. And like, I don't think I was. And I was really kind of confused and perplexed what he was going for. And so I just asked him, I would just go, is this the thing your mom emailed us about? And he's like, my mom emailed you? And I'm like, yeah, like she did. Is this what it was about? And I was being serious. I wasn't like trying to be cheeky. I wasn't trying to make it seem like, oh yeah, your mom emailed us, haha. Like it was just basically I was trying to get to the bottom of what he was talking about. And he was so embarrassed that he then answered the questions for me. There are a few other times too, like I wrote about a goalless streak for Shea Weber. He was a player for the Predators and ended up making the Hockey Hall of Fame. He then scored a goal, and one of his teammates, a guy named Eric Nystrom, walked past me. He's like, "Hey, you're not going to write about Weber going goalless anymore, are you?" But nothing really that bad. And like, I mean, the key is always to go into as long as you're fair and you go in the room the next day, like people respect you and they'll like you. Like Shea, I still keep up with. Like he's awesome. Like probably one of the few athletes I still keep up with because he's like such a nice guy. Well, like one of the greatest moments of my career was I gave him a joke to put in his Hall of Fame speech, and he actually used it. And my wife was like, "Did people laugh?" And I was like, "Yeah, they did." And she's like, "Good job." So really like, but that goes to just, Jeff mentioned like a hit piece. Go into the locker room, make sure to talk to them, put your recorder away when you talk to them sometimes, ask about their families, ask about various things, get to the bottom of scenarios, and you'll find out you have way more common ground with these athletes than it may seem like you do.
Keep in mind, these athletes are the best, their entire lives. They're the best on their little league team year in and year out. Just using a baseball analogy. So everything is just praise, 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 praise. And you get to a certain level and it becomes a little more criticism and a little bit more of a microscope. And they're generally not used to that. And one of the things that's also very important is from a PR perspective, if an athlete comes up and says, hey, who wrote this, or I want to talk to this person. Or no, I'm sorry. Hey, heard so and so said something on the telecast last night, and I'll be like, oh, you heard it? You heard that? Oh no,
My mom.
my wife told me. And then, oh, okay. Why don't you go listen to it yourself and make sure it's accurate? Because often you get this. My neighbor told my cousin, who told me, and 9 times out of 10, the athlete didn't even hear it or see it. Obviously, it's a little different when there's the print. But for the sake of time, Josh, we thank you for your time and insight.
Yeah. Do you have any time for questions or you don't, Jeff?
No, we got to roll time wise.
All good.
Thanks,
Well, this is
sir.
fun. And I think
Appreciate
my
it.
email is on whatever Jeff sends out. Please reach out. Like, I think I got someone an internship once and someone worked at the Olympics. So you just never know. So just shoot me an email. Maybe
I'll
something
pass along
will
the
happen.
email, and if you have any questions about your story before deadline, maybe he'll respond in time. All right, thanks, Josh.
Absolutely will. Absolutely. Please send me anything. All right. Bye.
Take care.